if you're a leader in a business and you were doing a great job, CJ, how do I get comfortable giving you a promotion if you haven't built the right team underneath you and have the right succession plan? Because if I move you out, your area is going to crumble, and now what am I going to do?
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
What's up, everybody? CJ, Run the Numbers podcast here. I just got off the phone with Tony Boor, the CFO of Blackbaud. What a cool dude. When I grow up, I want to be Tony. He started off his career running a motorcycle shop in New Mexico. That's pretty badass. He climbed the ladder in the shop as a pretty young guy, and that was his first management experience. Now, look at this. He's a public company CFO. We talk about Blackbaud's business model. They do over $1 billion in revenue while also helping employees and individuals give. I don't really think it gets better than that. He brings business acumen to really good causes. We talk about vertical software models, how it positions them to expand into areas like payments, which are very valuable. We actually go deep on the payment space. It's something that I've been personally looking into and very fascinated by. Over $100 billion pass through their platform each year. And he talks about how they monetize that and how they win the strategic high ground to do so. Tony also has a really cool view on metrics, specifically efficiency metrics. So he has this one called ARR per OTE. We go through what good looks like there, any rules of thumb. He talks about EVA and ROIC, as well as residual cash earnings. Tony also has a view on consolidation and centers of excellence. So one of the themes that he lives by is to simplify, standardize, and automate, something that I may steal. He breaks that down for us, and he talks about how his restructuring experience over in Europe and Africa helped him think about reducing costs for higher impact. This is an interview with another public company CFO, one of the guys who's seen a lot, has had an amazing career, and you're not going to want to miss this one after a short word from our sponsors. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and Seeky choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into NetSuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. leapfin.com. Ready to plan confidently, close faster, and report more accurately? Here's what sets Planful apart. Imagine purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. It's easy to implement Planful in just weeks and with minimal IT involvement, so you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business on your key financial progress. Best of all, Planful grows with you. Its unparalleled scalability ensures that no matter how fast your business expands, Planful can keep up. See why over 1,500 customers worldwide choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Oh yeah! Go to planful.com/metrics to see how you can reach peak financial performance with Planful. That's planful.com/metrics. Tony, welcome to the Run the Numbers pod.
Well, I'm glad to be here. This is going to be exciting for the next hour.
I want to go way back in time, and doing some research, I found that you started your career actually at a motorcycle shop in New Mexico. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how that all happened. I grew up in a family that raced. So ever since I was, 2 years old, I remember going to the dirt track stock car races because my parents had stock cars and then my older brothers had stock cars. And so we had mini bikes and go-karts and that kind of stuff. But when I was 13 or 14, I went to buy my first motorcycle.
Okay.
And they ended up hiring me to start hauling trash and sweeping floors. And 10 years later, I was the general manager.
So you worked your way up literally from the ground floor there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of cool. By the time I got to the GM spot, I'd worked every position, I think. So I started sweeping floors, like I said, out in the shop and cleaning up and hauling trash. And then moved into the service department. So I actually worked on bikes for a while, and then moved into the parts department, and then became the parts manager, and then moved into the sales department, and then became sales manager, did some of the accounting and payroll and stuff. I think that's where I got my first kind of taste for business, and then I liked that. And then ultimately was the general manager for the final couple of years.
So I was going to ask any tips for convincing your wife to let you get a motorcycle, but we can leave that one for a different podcast.
Yeah, I'm not any good at that one because my wife made me get rid of them. I sold the last ones I had when I moved to Indiana to get married originally.
Oh man,
I raced for about 8 years, motocross and supercross and short track and all that. So she wasn't very fond of that since we were going to have kids. Decided I need to quit all that fun stuff.
Yeah, my hypothesis was I should have came into the relationship with a motorcycle, but now that I have 2 kids, I think I'm out of that zone.
Exactly. Maybe when you retire, right?
Yeah, someday. But I've got to think like you probably learned a lot about customer service at a young age.
Oh my goodness, it was a great experience, and I still draw on that. When I talk to staff or when I'm doing, we do these group luncheons and people can just ask whatever questions. A lot of it gets to be career discussion and how I got here and those kind of things, like some of what we'll talk about today. I always share that I learned a great deal. It was a small business, a couple $1 million a year, but I learned a ton about business and accounting and working with people and some of the sales skills. I still remember, one of the lessons learned is not to judge people, right, of how they dress or what they drive. And there was this buddy of mine's dad that they're big pecan farmers down there in New Mexico. And he came in his old beat up Jeep truck and he's dusty and he's got a dirty old cowboy hat. And I'm the sales manager at the time, and the sales guys wouldn't even wait on him. He walks in looking around. I walk out of my office, walk over and say, "Hey, Pancho, how you doing?" He writes me a check for, 6 3-wheelers that they're using for irrigation at the farm. But they automatically just critiqued him when he walked in, and said, "This is some old guy in a beat up truck. He doesn't have any money." And he was one of the richest guys in town. And that, the other side is to take good care of those folks, right? And build those relationships, because then they tell you and their other friends to come to the Honda and Yamaha shop to buy a motorcycle, not the Suzuki or Kawasaki, right? And to talk to Tony. So it's where I first learned how important relationships were, because so many of my future sales came from taking good care. Instead of trying to hit a home run on somebody, you took care of them and got them in the right bike at the right price, and they referred a bunch of other people to you.
That's amazing. You learned at a young age that you want to play long-term games with long-term people and that you can increase lifetime value. You probably weren't even thinking like, customer acquisition cost and lifetime value then, but it shows over time how you can grow with the customer and they'll keep coming back to you. Yeah,
exactly.
I'd imagine also that being young in that role, it was probably the first time that you managed people that were older than yourself. I remember specifically the first time that I managed someone on my team who was older than me. And it was, I don't know, I thought it was going to be an odd dynamic at first and it was totally fine, but I think it was kind of like a mindset thing going into it. Do you remember, was that the case at the shop?
Yeah, I had a lot of folks that were significantly older. I think what really helps and helped back then was knowing the job, because I'd worked in all the areas before I became manager, as you would expect. So like in the parts department or in the service department when I was working there, I had a lot of older, folks that were significantly older than me. But if you know your job and you're good at it, and hence why I got the promotion into those, I think there was really never any conflict or issues that I can recall having. It really felt pretty natural, to tell you the truth. And there was still a lot to learn from those folks, right? So it was kind of a two-way street, and you didn't, try and belittle anybody or act like you were superior because you're younger or any of those things. We just, we were a good team and worked together.
Right. You're all running a business together, and you were the GM. And looking at your career, tracing it back and looking for a through line, I kind of observed that although you're a CFO, you kind of strike me as a GM. Like you're very ingrained in the operations of things. Would a GM kind of be an apt characterization of a lot of the things that you've done so far in your career?
Yeah, or some slice or subset thereof, but certainly more than just the numbers guy, for sure. I've had HR departments, I've had CIOs reporting to me numerous times. I've had operations, as the interim president of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We'll talk about that a little more later. Interim CEO. Even when I came here, like to Blackbaud, I had our law department, so our general counsel and his team, corporate real estate reporting into me, our IR, our CIO and cyber teams, and a few others I'm forgetting. But it's typically, once I got out of public accounting into my first kind of on the other side of the desk, CFO controller roles, typically have always seemed to have had more than just the finance team.
Do you feel more broadly that's the way that the role of the CFO is going to move over time?
I think in most places it is, and especially now, when I talk to recruiters and, I'm always open trying to help them, find candidates. I'm where I am until I retire, but always happy to help them. And when I'm talking to a lot of these roles, they're looking for somebody who's going to be hooked at the hip with the CEO, helping drive strategy. Many cases, I just talked to one last week and gave him a couple of referrals, and he was talking about, it was a big private equity company, and they needed somebody who's going to really handle the operations of the business, not just the finance. So they were looking for a broader, that's why they saw my resume. They were reaching out to me originally, but there's somebody with that much broader experience, because the CEO is kind of a founder and sales guy and doesn't want to do any of the other stuff. And a lot of times then you'll leave that right to the CFO or COO if they've got one.
Yeah, that's one of the things that energizes me so much about this podcast, because I think if I started it 10 years ago, I'd probably be talking more accounting X's and O's. But now it seems like I'm talking to people who are fundamentally like fingerprint on the business day to day, and they can kind of fly low to the ground and be tactical, but they can also zoom back up strategy wise. So it does feel like the seat of the CFO is becoming a lot more operational probably than it used to be.
And I think it's, the relationship you build then with your team members, right, within the company, or it's so different as well. You're not just that bean counter or the finance person. And it feels like you get a lot more credibility when you've been in the business helping them in the day to day versus just closing the books or, doing the budgets and the forecasts.
It also better positions you to help them solve problems and allocate resources, because if you understand the business, you can probably see around corners that you otherwise wouldn't have exposure to.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. You have a lot more insight, right, as a result.
What's your mindset like, being able to marry like your skills with running a business and also doing good?
Yeah, it's an awesome opportunity. I've been here 13 years in November timeframe. And when I left Brightpoint, I took some time off. So it was like my first time to kind of take a true sabbatical. I was going to take a year off, and then like all of us, I think I started getting anxious and updated the resume and start sending out some feelers, just because I'm worried, well, what if in a year I don't have a gig? And God, I started getting bombarded with opportunities, and I really wanted to take this chance. I was hoping this would be my last opportunity, and I would, be more coaching, mentoring. I was later in my career, and I would ride into the sunset and retirement from here. And this one just came across the desk, and I was so excited. It was crazy, because it was in the tech space. So I got to get into software, which I was very interested in doing. And we had 40,000 nonprofit customers. So it was like, what a win-win. I'd been very active. I still am, being on boards of nonprofits. And so I love giving back to the community. My wife and I do a lot of that. And so it was just like a huge opportunity when this one came through. And I love the company, the people. A lot of the folks that come here because of what we do. But it's also a big successful software company that's been around almost 44 years. And so it was kind of a best of both worlds. And to get to work with the cancer societies and American Hearts and the Memorial Sloan Ketterings, and we were just out in Napa for a big fundraiser with the Jimmy V Foundation, and it is pretty cool. It's neat. You get to marry all the stuff in tech and software, but you're doing it with all these nonprofits, and makes you feel good that you're having an impact in the world.
Yeah. And the way that I kind of think about it, and this is just my simple mind, is you're kind of the operating system for a lot of these charities in the background. So you're one of the most successful publicly traded vertical software companies, and you've gone from having one product to multiple. I'm wondering if you could just walk me through the revenue layer cake strategy you developed over time. I understand you're a software company, but did it actually start with payments?
Yeah, it's software is where we started. Our founder, if you can imagine, because we're so old, was a consultant at the time and wrote some DOS-based code
Okay.
for a private girls' school in New York. They're still a customer today, if you can believe it. And that code he wrote led to the original creation of what we call Financial Edge, which is our nonprofit specific financial solution, accounting solution, right? So if you think of NetSuite or something, we have one that's built for nonprofits specifically, and then expanded into fundraising. And that became what is our core legacy product, the Razor's Edge. And so those two products have been around since largely the inception of the company. So those are all those two products. And then over the years, through acquisition and building and innovation, we built up a portfolio of 60 to 70 different software solutions.
Wow.
Just crazy. Now since our new CEO came on board about 11 years ago, we've been working on diversifying and shrinking that and getting rid of a lot of overlapping. We've done a great job. We've sunset or gotten rid of probably 35 or 40 solutions now. We've got about 18 core solutions today. Transactions didn't exist in the early days. It largely didn't exist till Mike came on board. He came from Fiserv and was at Check Free before that with Pete Kite. And Pete was the guy who wrote the first electronic check effectively, right? Which became the company Check Free that Fiserv bought. And so Mike brought with him this payments capability. We had a little bit of payments where we did some processing of donations for our customers, but we really built what is now a third of our revenue after Mike came on board 11 years ago. So we moved to the cloud. We moved to SaaS from a maintenance kind of approach, the old school sell license software and maintenance. We're now in the cloud, all subscription, and about a third of our revenues transaction was largely zero 11 years ago.
That's amazing. Just to play that back for listeners. So you started as on-prem perpetual license and you moved that software to the cloud. And then you realize, well, we own a control point here, or I guess like the high ground. We're in a great position to add payments to this as well.
Right. And we do that, the transactions would include things like, donor management. So you're making a donation online at one of the websites. In most cases, that'll be through our platform, through our payments platform. You're participating in one of the big runs, walks, or rides for a charity. Yeah. That'll be through our platform and the money you raise, and people donate to you, like on Just Giving or those peer-to-peer fundraising sites. Most likely, we're handling those. If your company was using our Your Cause platform and you're making employee gifts and then a company match on it, that would be using our payments platform. If your kids were going to private K-12 school and you're paying tuition to that school, most likely you're on our tuition management platform for making those payments. So we've got all these different sources, all different types of transactions, but we handle nearly $20 billion worth of donations of one type or another through our platforms. Now, we only record, our piece of that revenue, so we're on net accounting, but, we're a pretty damn good sized bank when you think about the 20 billion of transactions we process at, $50 and $75 and $100 a piece. There's a lot of volume there.
That's crazy. That's much larger than I bet a lot of people think. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. As a startup CFO, the number one question my friends come to me with is, who do you use for banking? That's right. They don't ask me for my chicken parm recipe, and they don't ask me where I got my dog groomed. I'm the friend they come to for invoicing, credit card, and bank account advice. Go figure. So I thought I'd just come out and answer it for everybody on the podcast. I recently made the switch to Mercury because I was losing my mind trying to get a clear understanding of how cash entered and left the building. Financial operations were getting needlessly complex, and that's coming from someone who does finance stuff for a living. You can't manage what you can't measure, so I made the change. Plus, it took me literally under 10 minutes to go from application to approval. I'm not kidding. It was wild. Mercury simplifies your financial operations with powerful banking, and it gives you greater control, precision, and speed so you can operate at your best. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by the Choice Financial Group and Evolve Banking Trust. Members FDIC. What does the future hold for business? Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 38,000 businesses, wow, that's a lot of companies, have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're able to peer into the future and seize new opportunities. Download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning for free at netsuite.com/metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. METRICS, metrics. Please, guys, I really need this. Annual planning season is upon us. That's right, my favorite time of year. And it's not just about setting goals for the coming year. It's about ensuring you have the right tools in place to measure and achieve those goals. As a SaaS CFO, I know having access to reliable, real-time metrics is crucial for my annual planning process. That's why I'm so excited to partner with today's sponsor, Maxio. Maxio is a billing and financial operations platform that helps subscription businesses reconcile bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, and SaaS metrics automatically. By the way, guys, bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, not the same thing. Got to get them straight. Because these numbers are the foundation of your financial models, it's important to have quick access and trust that they are correct. Don't let the complexities of SaaS finance and accounting slow you down. If you want to start 2025 with the right tools, check out Maxio by visiting maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Request a demo through our link to support the podcast, ya boy, and receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. maxio.com/run the numbers. Please, guys, I really need this. So I think last week I actually used you. So I do a lot of local like 5K, 10K road races. And there was one, do it every year in Naples. It's called Run for the Paws. It's for the Humane Society. And then I also do like a small donation on behalf of my dog, Walter.
Yeah.
At the end, I noticed that like I could also pay for the processing fee on top of the of the race that I was doing. So what I'm realizing now is that it seems like there's this long tail of like smaller community events, but then you probably also have, I guess, customers, you call them, of like American Heart Society or like enterprise type customers as well.
Yeah. A lot of the biggest. So I don't know what the specific number is today, but we probably have 75 to 85% of the biggest runs and walks and rides. So American Heart and Cancer and all of those. And then, we help, they use our solutions to run all their galas, right? So if you're going to I've been on the exec committee for the Charleston Heart Ball for 6 or 7 years now, and they'll use our tools for a lot of that stuff too, and the auctions and the event management. And there's quite a bit in our solutions. It's really, a lot of our tools are called CRMs, but it's misleading. They're not CRMs, they're donor management, right? And event management and volunteer management. But it's kind of a CRM based system, but it's purpose built, to manage those specific things nonprofits need versus what you'd think. We use Salesforce, right, to manage our sales team, but wouldn't sell Salesforce to a nonprofit. Some try to use it to do this stuff, but then they have to bolt a lot of other solutions onto it, kind of best of breed solutions to kind of mimic what a Razor's Edge or our big enterprise CRM would do.
I love how you use the term purpose built, Tony, because a lot of companies say that, but you don't really totally know what they mean by that. But I think the benefit of being a vertical software company serving the space that you're in is you can be maniacally focused on like the value that this customer type needs.
Right. Yeah. It's when you think of ours, like we talked about those legacy products, Financial Edge and Razor's Edge, those products are very purpose built. So when you think about the financials, it's, the same as every other package. You got procure to pay and order to cash and GL and all of that related stuff. But the general ledger, the way it's set up, manages fund accounting and it manages encumbrances. So you make a donation to your university and you say it can only go to an accounting major that's on the baseball team and they have to have a GPA, whatever. Well, the school has to track that and report back to you that that's how they used your money. Well, how do you do that in a typical accounting package? Well, ours is purposely built to do that. And then nonprofits have to do 990s, which requires a bunch of allocation of expenses to all these different buckets, right? What's fundraising costs versus operational costs or mission delivery costs? And you could do that with a regular accounting package, but it's a lot of work. You're setting up a bunch of sub accounts and doing allocations, where ours has that allocation and apportionment stuff built right into it. So once you set up in chart of accounts, it points to where it's supposed to go and automate the journal entries and does all that for you so that you've got the data in the right place to be able to then spit it out and do your 990, for instance. And then like we were talking about on the fundraising side, we call it a CRM, but it's not CRM, it's fundraising management. And it's purposely built. It's not for making a sale, it's for managing a donor, right? Or a constituent, a grateful patient if you're a hospital foundation, or right, an alumni if you're an alumni from the university. So we sell to most of the big universities, and they all use our tool to reach out to you and I and ask us for more money and to nurture that relationship over the years so that hopefully, down the road, you'll bequest a bunch of money out of your estate to the school, right?
Yeah, I can think of it's funny when you describe it, I can think of specific examples in my life of how I guess the software would be purpose built. So every year around Christmas, Boston College calls me where I went and they ask for a donation. And I either do it to the newspaper because I wrote for the school newspaper, or I do it for like the intramural flag football program just because I had so much fun with my buddies doing it. But I always make the payment. I'm like, I have no idea if that's actually going like to that specific group. But with software like this, you wouldn't be able to track that with like a horizontal software. You'd have to code up something yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. Like New Mexico State, I had not heard from them, until I got here. So I was at Blackbaud. So you can think of how long my career's been.
Right.
Had never heard boo from them. And out of the blue, I get a call from the Alumni Association and the ex-governor of New Mexico, who's the chancellor now at the university. They want to come out and meet with me and my wife. And I'm like, how'd you find me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we bought your software with your analytics. And by the way, all
No
my
way.
personal data is in the proxy. They know how much money I make, but they'd never
Yeah.
reached out to me. They got our software and our analytics, said, oh, well, this Tony Boor guy is now CFO of a public company, makes a bunch of money. Here's where he lives, what we think his net worth is, his propensity to give. You should probably reach out to him and ask for a donation.
Oh man, that's so meta that they found you using
Yeah.
your own software.
Yeah. Just hilarious.
Thanks for sharing that. So you do over $100 billion a year passing through the platform. What's like your perspective on payments for vertical software companies? Do you think they should all do it, or is it kind of overhyped for those who kind of can't truly assess where they sit in the ecosystem?
If you can get your hands on that transaction volume, I think it adds real value, because it adds value, especially in our case, it adds a lot of value to the customer, because they ultimately want to know who all those donors are and get those people into their database. Even if they're given small dollars, they want to get them in a database and be able to use that data going forward. When they're using third parties, it's not automated through APIs. It's not automatically loaded. It doesn't automatically load into their GL. That's where our purpose-built solutions really save them a lot of time. Because if I'm doing the payments processing and donation, even if it's not the payments, if I'm just doing the donation processing through the website for them, all that data is getting loaded right into their donation solution. And if they have the financial edge solution, it's going right into their accounting system as well, real time, versus getting feeds and download and reload and uploading and creating duplicates and all the other stuff that goes with it. Creates just a lot of downstream work. So there's a lot of efficiency, certainly in our business. But I think that's the case in most companies. There's just a lot of efficiency, and it's great revenue. The margins can look a little funky, like for us on the credit card process in the US. You talked about this new tip model, right? Complete cover or tip jar model. We're just bringing that to the US. We've been doing that in the UK for a long time. That really improves your margins, because typically people will give a higher percentage than what we would have for a take rate on that transaction. So normally, like, a take rate will be 2.5 to 3 points, right? And then I got to pay the processors to process that transaction. So I pass through a couple of, 2 or 2.25. So my margins are 30, 35%. But if you give 5% tip, well, that 300 basis point or 275 is now 500, but my cost of goods don't change. Right. I'm still passing through the same 200. So think of what that does to my margin on that business. Instead of 35, it's 50 or 60. Wow. And it's great cash flow. It's awesome cash flow. Sometimes depending on the model you're set up, you can make money on the deposits in transit while they're sitting in the bank until they get dispersed to the customers, et cetera. So it's a good additive piece of business to have. It's a nice kind of royalty stream to add, I think, to any business that can get in it. Now, it comes with a lot of risks when you think about transactions like what we're doing. You got KYC, you got to know your customer, you got to do all the OFAC screening. You got to act like you're a bank. You got a lot of stuff that you have to do to keep everybody compliant and deal with anti-money laundering and the drug cartels trying to test stuff. And so there's a lot of other headaches that comes with that. But if you can figure out how to make that work and do it properly, it's really good business.
I'm really glad you broke that down for us, because there are probably a lot of listeners out there who are thinking about adding payments. And like the two biggest questions they have are, one, how much can I actually make from it? Dave Yon and the folks at Tidemark, who do a lot of vertical software investing, they've done a study, and they said that the median you could get was 80 basis points. But I mean, it can start as low as 20 basis points, and it can go as high as 125 or 1.25%. But like it differs by industry and by how much volume you have going through. And then I think the other thing a lot of people are questioning is like, how risky is this for me to do? Like, I've never actually underwritten something like this before.
Yeah, it's you got to have the right skill set, the right people on the team. Like I said, we've got a whole team as if we were a decent sized bank, frankly, that does all the compliance stuff. And the rules keep changing, right? The UK passed a bunch of new rules a couple of years ago that you're dealing with, and Canada's changed the rules. The payment processors are always changing the rules about what data you have to get for know your customer, and a lot of times you have to get owners of the business and or board members, and there's a lot of data that you have to gather and then manage properly so that you don't get turned off, right? It very quickly gets yourself sideways if you don't understand it. So making sure you bring the right partners to the table is what I would recommend folks do. I'm always happy to talk to them. Our team is as well, but we're looking at a lot of other options, like how do we put our strong cash flow and balance sheet to work in other ways? And so we're rolling out some payables kind of solutions now through Financial Edge that our customers can use to get out of cutting checks and doing electronic payments. And it's just part of the solution. They just have to turn it on, and there's rebates that they get and we get that come as part of that. We're partnering with a third party to do that. We're looking at, could we roll out something like on, all the supplies that the nonprofits have to buy and their airline and travel? Can we be an aggregator for the purchasing, and they get a rebate, we get a rebate, and they get, their supplies at 20% below what they would have to pay on their own because they're a small business versus aggregating it across all of our customers. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics that we're looking at of other services where we could use our cash flow and balance sheet to, improve their business model and for us to make some other incremental kind of royalty streams.
It's so fascinating to reflect on it in real time because at first I thought it was just, it's payments. You take a rip off the top, but it's really this crawl, walk, run where you can go from payments to financial services. So it's almost like you started with a layer cake strategy within vertical software of starting as SaaS and then payments. You can have a layer cake strategy even within your financial services.
Right. Exactly. And some interesting business models that, allows you to kind of spread your risk around, right, and diversify the business. And during the pandemic, we thought we were just going to get killed. We thought the nonprofit industry was going to get hammered because they couldn't even be open, right? You think about museums and zoos and a lot of those things, churches, but a lot of it went online. So a lot of churches that weren't online tithing went online because they didn't have a choice because people couldn't come to mass physically. And so a lot of old school folks went electronic, and we saw a surge in giving online. So giving went from being about 9% of total giving in the U.S. had been that 9 to 10% for years and years, decades, went to about 13, 14% during the pandemic, just because you had to give online because you couldn't hand people money or checks anymore. And so there's still this huge opportunity because we still have a lot of cash and checks getting handled in the U.S., right, compared to the rest of the world. And so there's still a tremendous opportunity for expansion from that, share a wallet of what's electronic and online. But, it's interesting. The nonprofit space, the folks like you and I supported those businesses, even while they were shut down. We had less businesses go out of business during the pandemic than prior, which is just amazing. I was expecting, we're doing that what if scenarios and all the sensitivity analysis and stuff when we walked into the pandemic. I assume we're going to have a huge bad debt and a bunch of customer churn because they were going to go bankrupt, right? And we actually had less than we had years before, which was just dumbfounding to me. Great news, but very surprising.
It was a positive inflection point from that standpoint. You brought people online that wouldn't have been there before. So that's amazing. Tony, I also want to talk about efficiency metrics. I know that's something near and dear to your heart. And just looking at your financial profile since you're public, you do an amazing job at it. And so one of the metrics I heard you throw around on a different podcast was ARR per OTE. Can you explain what that metric is?
Yeah, ARR to OTE. So the OTE is the total earnings for a sales rep. So when you think about if you with their commission, with their benefits, all the stuff, depending on what all you want to put in their base salary, whatever they may get. So you're looking at, if I'm paying a sales rep $200,000, depends on the type of rep, right? If they're on the lower end of the market, going more the small business versus enterprise. And there's a lot of nuances in the software space, even in our business, because we sell to so many different size orgs. We've got lots of different types of reps and they'll have different plans. But just say if a rep, a good peer benchmark, if a rep makes 200 OTE, you would like them to do about 800,000 in ARR. So their annual recurring revenue, their bookings that they deliver per year, you'd like it to be about a 4-to-1. Now that then leads into CAC, right? So if you're doing that, your CAC is kind of the opposite direction. Your customer acquisition costs, that'll have marketing expense, lead gen, and a bunch of other stuff in there. But you're looking at what's that cost to acquire that customer or that booking number. And then you're looking, a lot of times CAC will be a CAC and a CAC payback. CAC doesn't really tell you anything other than you'd like to see the CAC go down for the amount of dollars you're raising. But that's really looking at your CAC payback. How long does it take me to pay back that customer acquisition cost? Good, if you follow like the Bessemer metrics and those kind of things, they would say something less than 24 months is a good CAC payback.
Yeah.
But if you look at Tyler Technology,
they're great.
I would say Brian and team don't care about a 2-year payback because their customers stay with them forever. They have like 98, 99% retention. So their lifetime value is crazy. So they don't care about the CAC. They care about every new customer they can get because they know that customer's going to be with me for 98 years or 99 years, right? And so it's really interesting as you get into all those CAC and CAC payback and LTV to CAC. We were just having this discussion at ELT, our leadership team offsite last week. There's not one of those metrics that's perfect. I would say LTV to CAC is probably the best because it's most encompassing, but you want to look at all of those AROTE, the CAC payback, LTV to CAC, et cetera, because depending on your business model, what's good for one might not be the right answer for you, right?
And the way you describe Tyler Technologies, they're probably looking at it like, no, I'm signing up an annuity stream here.
Correct. Yeah, and if you've ever looked at like when people talk about retention rates, it's really interesting. I've done this with my team because a lot of times people don't understand it. If you have a 99% retention rate, that means your average customer life's 99 years. But a 98% retention means your customer life is 50.
Oh, it's halved.
Right? Yeah. It's only a 1 point difference in retention, but it's half the, right? And then 97 is 33-year life, and 96 is 25-year life. 95, right? 90.
That's
so as
powerful.
you go down, the difference between 100% retention and 90 is huge, right? You're losing 10% of your customer base every year. So at 90, they're a 10-year life, right?
I'm glad you called that out because sometimes we can get lost in the math of like what the actual impact is. Speaking of retention, net dollar retention, is that one that you track closely?
Yeah, that's a really important one. We look at unit retention, so kind of customer overall. Are we keeping the customer? Because they may get rid of this product and buy that. We got 18 solutions plus a bunch of services. It's kind of like your Comcast. You're turning stuff on and off and all the time, and they've got different options. And so we look at kind of customers. Are we keeping our customer? And that's our unit metric. And then we look at gross dollar retention and net dollar retention. Both are very important. Gross dollar retention, is a good indicator of are you holding your own from a overall retention perspective, because you're not giving yourself credit for the upsells and cross sells and price increases and et cetera. And so that's a good one to watch at. But net is really about growth, because net's looking at all the inbound new revenue from that customer, less all the churn. And so that really tells you if you're growing, because if you get above 100% on net, you're growing. If you're below 100, you're shrinking. It's that simple, right? And the higher you are above the 100, the faster you're growing.
Can you do net dollar retention on a customer combining both their revenue from SaaS and payments? Like it's total wallet share. How much did the customer expand?
But it does create dynamics for us because it's not the same, right? And so we look at it kind of with and without, because the payments business is so unique, and they could go to a third-party provider tomorrow but not churn the software. And so we kind of have to look at it in both directions.
Yeah, that was a selfish question because I'm trying to figure out how to do it myself.
Exactly. And we do it with and without. Almost all the product P&Ls, everything we do, you're doing activity-based costing, we're doing, return on invested capital. All those are with and without typically, because it's such an odd nuance, especially with the margin structure being so different.
That was actually the next one I wanted to ask about. So return on invested capital, how does that one work?
Well, it's interesting. It's a lot less of a focus for us in this software business, where we're billing a year in advance in most cases, and you have negative cash conversion cycles and negative working capital, and then what I would have had like at Brightpoint, where I have inventory all over the world and it's going obsolete overnight, and I've got huge accounts receivable for all the phones and accessories I sold to everybody. And so, then return on invested capital and EVA was critical, because you had to make sure you were getting, our margins were paper thin. And so you had to really watch your balance sheet, and you're taking on a lot of inventory exposure and a lot of credit exposure. And so managing, EVA and ROIC was critical. I think it was also critical to our stock price because of the nature of the business being a distribution business. So a lot more important back then than it is today, but we still use it to make our resource allocation decisions, like the engineering and where we're going to put our money, where we're going to put our salespeople, and we've kicked the tires and done quite a bit of work on residual cash earnings with those guys, with George and those guys. And it's just, we haven't gotten to a point that we think it's necessarily the right thing to roll out across the entirety business, but something we're still looking at. It's certainly really helpful in allocating resources and reallocating resources to the best use, and the strongest use. We historically look at it also because we do so many acquisitions. I think we've done 14 in the 13 years I've been here. So we use it a lot there too to make sure we're getting a return on those acquisitions. And we'll usually use a modified ROIC calc, a Holt methodology like from Credit Suisse that kind of normalizes for some things to give you, I think, a better, more consistent across industry kind of view. So that's usually what we've used at the higher level of looking at the company and return for the total company, which historically we've been, 18 to 20+% ROIC.
Wow.
And our WACC is 7 to 8. So we're getting 2 to 3 times our WACC, which is pretty damn strong.
WACC is 7-8. That's what people dream for. Okay. EVA, what's that one again?
So economic value add is just the opposite of ROIC, right? So it's the opposite side of the equation.
Sure.
So you're doing the charge and netting to get to $1, what value did you create versus ROIC is the percentage. So it's exactly really the same metric. It's just the other side of it in a hard dollar versus percentage. And they're both important because you could have this tremendously high return on investment, but it only be $1. Or you could have a lower return on investment rate, but it could be $1 billion. And so, my treasurer and I often argue with folks, would you rather have a 20% return on a $100,000 base of invested capital or 10% on a $20 billion? So, hence I think EVA and ROIC kind of come into play depending on which way you're looking at it and what kind of decisions you're making. But it's effectively the same thing, right? Just a little different math. One's got the charge in it already and gets to a raw dollar. One's a percentage. Interesting reading if you ever want to read his book.
Okay. And then residual cash earnings, is that one that you would still do if you were a private company, or is that mostly just for public companies?
No, I think residual cash earnings is a really neat concept. I like it. And it's just a slight tweak, out of the same concepts of EVA, ROIC. It's like the Holt methodology, but they've done, some other things. I like it. I like the approach. I think it's a good approach, private or public. It's really helpful in allocating resources. So when you're going through the budgeting process, long range modeling, strategy, ALPs, and people are asking for dollars, really can be really helpful of deciding where you should put your dollars to maximize returns. Because, even if you have a negative return, looking at residual cash earnings, you can improve upon that. So it's really about how do I, every period, whatever that reporting period is, get better? How do I improve my performance? It really helps, I think, if you install it across the business to make better resource allocation decisions.
That's amazing. I know a lot of people at home are probably Googling how they can do that themselves, because the incremental improvement is powerful, because many times when you are just starting out, it will be a negative return at first. Correct. And you're trying to improve it each quarter.
Correct. Especially in the tech space, right?
Yeah, totally. When I was doing some research, I read somewhere that you have product leaders that run a P&L. Is that still true today? And if so, could you maybe take us through how you organize that?
Yeah, that was one of the many org changes we made. And we did it took a lot of years to get through this because we were kind of a conglomerate. We'd bought a bunch of companies and developed a bunch of products, but they were all kind of standing on their own all over the damn place. And we had offices all over the world, a ton of them in the US and different places from all those acquisitions. And when Mike came on board, we made a big push to consolidate. We started putting in centers of excellence, shared service centers, redid our whole go-to-market on the sales and marketing side, went to hunter-farmer models and enterprise and consumer-based and all of those things. So it took us 8 or 9 years to get through all that. We were just got done with all that heavy lifting right before the pandemic hit us. So it was quite a journey to get there. We consolidated a lot of the back office systems and, as a result, because you had 3 or 4 different financial systems that different people had at different companies we'd bought, never consolidated, and used Hyperion to consolidate all these. And then, one of the areas that we recently made changes, this is one of the last ones we did, is we went to this pillar model. And so because we have such a diverse portfolio, now we look at kind of fundraising as a pillar, financials as a pillar. And so we have these pillars, and then with pillar leads underneath them, then they have a subset of our product portfolio, and they're getting, activity-based costing built models, P&Ls, that then they look at and try and, again, goes back to how do we allocate resources next year if we have, 900 or 1,000 engineers on staff plus a bunch of, third-party ones. How do you decide where to point all those folks? when are you going to work on innovation? So they have their P&Ls, that we do their ROIC and, residual cash earnings calcs. And that's kind of how we decide where we're going to move dollars around. It's one of the ways we look at how we allocate the dollars.
That's amazing. And I love how it took some iterations to get there over time. And you admitted that it probably wasn't cleanly set up before, but it was an evolution.
And it'll continue to change because our portfolio will change and the market will change. And, as we start rolling out new services like financial services and stuff we talked about, that may change. And so we may need another pillar that becomes our fin services business potentially or something. And so, but those we're working through, how do you compensate those people to make sure they're really focused on improving that performance of their portfolio and their pillar, et cetera, and how are they working together with the others. So it's an interesting, we've been kind of in that model, I think, for about 2 years now, this newest pillar model, and it seems to be working really well.
How do you link the finance team to the pillar model? Do you have like a controller for each pillar and an FP&A person? How do you match that up?
Yeah, so we've got business partners is what we call them, finance business partners within the FP&A team that will work with them. And we currently have one lead finance business partner, so kind of like their CFO per se, that is working with all the pillars. And then that person, Nikki, happens to have, the necessary staff underneath her to support them. So finance kind of does it all centrally and gives them their P&Ls and their, EVA and all that stuff. And then they'll, work with them on business cases and strategy and allocation decisions, et cetera.
Gotcha. And I just love how you've laid out this company, and many companies out there, they also aspire to centralize back offices to a certain degree. Isn't that a journey that you also underwent?
Yeah, a big one. So like I said, our CIO reported into me until about 2 years ago when we made some other organizational changes and kind of created our first COO position. And so we moved IT and cyber under that new CIO under Kevin Gregoire. Prior to that, though, Todd and team reported into me, and we were on a journey, and this started before our new CEO. So this started when I first came on board. We were on a journey for probably 11 years to get the back office consolidated. We had so many disparate CRMs and financial stacks, and we had stuff all over the place. And so
I've been through that.
We had to build a strategy, and you weren't going to get it done overnight, and it's expensive, right? And so
super expensive.
One of the first things we did was we picked Workday for HR. We thought we might have to bolt another, revenue kind of solution onto Workday, but luckily we were able to build enough things within their construct. But we largely reduced probably over 100 different point solutions down to 10 or 12. Well, think about recruiting used a different solution than they did for onboarding, a different solution for your check-ins or your performance reviews. We had another solution, and we had different procurement and accounts payable solutions, and we had different solutions for collections, and we had multiple, like we said, multiple ERPs still out there and financial packages. And it's funny when you start looking through, they add up in a hurry. I think any business I've been at, surprising how many different solutions are out there that people use.
I was at a company and I was running FP&A, and at the end of each month, Tony, I had to do an export from NetSuite for the US. I had to do an export from Xero for the UK. I had to do an export from QuickBooks for Israel, and then an export from QuickBooks for Asia. And then I would take them all and I'd do a bunch of VLOOKUPs in Excel. So it defeated the whole purpose.
It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah. And the company was that big.
And just one screw up and one VLOOKUP, and who knows what you got, right?
Right. I'm one VLOOKUP away from chaos.
Yeah, exactly. A big accounting restatement if you're not careful. Let alone how do you audit that, right?
Yeah. Well, it's they'll do a Harvard business case study or something on how you restructured that, because chopping out 100 point solutions, that's nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah, now we're using Workday actually to build out this new kind of subledger on steroids for the transaction business. We're trying to build out our own kind of back office, one common platform, because most of the current code that we use to manage all the transaction stuff is built into those related products. So if it's the online donations versus the tuition management versus your cause's platform, et cetera. And so we're trying to build out this back office solution. We're actually using Workday and Prism to build this big subledger that automates the journal entries and the rev rec and then all the reconciliations and roll forwards of all those millions and millions and millions of transactions, so that we can have a better handle on that. And then we can use AI tools to do the roll forwards and reconciliations, make sure the numbers tie and reconcile back to the Stripes and MasterCards and Visas of the world. Where phase one is almost done as we speak, and then we'll have 4 more phases for the other transaction pieces of business we spoke about earlier. But then we'll build out this kind of back office team. It'll be no longer in the engineering team's hands. It'll be in the kind of back office. I'm not sure if that'll live in finance or somewhere else, but we'll have a dedicated team that's handling everything transaction, which will be neat.
I think that's something that a lot of people, when they undergo these transitions, underestimate, is that they have this homegrown solution that's been tracking and doing RevRec for so long that they forget that they need engineers to help with this. Yeah. And then they end up pulling in engineering resources who are supposed to be building the actual product in order to get it done.
They're not building innovation for the product. They're over here trying to fix our accounting on the back end.
Right. Yeah.
And our approach as we move to the cloud, and our CEO and our head of all the engineering teams and product really had a vision years ago, and we've been working towards it, which is to build it once, not 10 times. And so, you need email capability within their product, but let's build email capability, or if frankly, because our customers send so many emails, let's go to somebody who does that on steroids. That's all they do for their day job, and use them to do all the email sending, right? And just connect via an API. Let's not try and build that ourselves in each product, but what we've moved to now is a platform with microservices kind of approach. And that's why we're rewriting all these legacy products, so that if I need events management, I don't need to build events management in the 5 products that might need to manage events. I build events management once, and you consume it as a microservice through the platform. And so in the past, I'd have to engineers write code, 5 different potential code bases in different languages, right? Because I have products I bought all these years, and they all needed event management. Each engineering team had to write their own, right, scripts and new code for that. Where now what we're trying to do is build it once, build it really well, and let everybody consume it instead of building it in each monolithic code stack. So that's part of moving the cloud journey, as well as huge efficiencies on the engineering side, especially if you have multiple products in the portfolio that have a lot of similar needs.
And that's probably music to your ears as a CFO, breaking the monolith and build it once, use it everywhere. Well,
and it's part of how we, our EBITDA 3 years ago was in the, low to mid 20s, and we're in the mid 30s now.
Right. That's a game changer.
We're a rule of 40 company this year. For the year, we were a 20 something 2 years ago.
Nice.
So there's huge efficiencies to be had with all of this stuff we're talking about.
Tony, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So I ask every successful person I have on this podcast, you got to give me one thing you've screwed up in your career. Could be at this job or a different one.
I've had a lot of them. We all make mistakes, that's for sure, right? There's no shortage of those. You just got to learn from them. I would say the one that bothered me the most and still bothers me is a large acquisition when I was at my old company. Very significant acquisition, our biggest competitor. And it was one of those, I didn't feel good about it, and I wasn't vocal enough. And we pulled the trigger on it. And then the economy fell apart in 07, 08. We'd taken on a bunch of debt with that acquisition, and it was not a well-run business. And hence, I was CFO of the company and president of Europe, Middle East, and Africa for the next 2.5 years, because I had to go do a major restructuring. So I flew back and forth to Europe damn near every other week for 2.5 years as we completely restructured that business. And it's that one I still kick myself, because and it's one of those you second guess. Had I pushed a little harder, had I worked a little harder on due diligence, might we have uncovered some of the things we uncovered after it was too late? You know what I mean? And it was a very painful 2.5 years, I can tell you, for the company and for me and for a lot of my team.
Yeah, in the airline, Miles. Do you think there's such a thing as deal momentum, that once it starts kind of becomes like a runaway train?
It is. It's hard to stop. Especially if the board's excited about it, it looks good on paper. It's tough to stop a moving train. And that happens a lot. And that's one where I knew, and I had this feeling in my gut, and I didn't push hard enough.
Yeah, it is funny how something can look good on paper, but you could still have a gut feel that's saying, it doesn't feel right. Next one I got for you. If you could tell your younger self something, knowing what you know today, what would you tell them?
I've been very lucky. When I talk about my career with team members and, doing career counseling with them, I tell you, what I learned over the years, and it's paid huge dividends, make sure you do your current job well before you start asking for the next one. Make sure you build the right team under you before you start asking for the next one. There's so many people that get so ahead of themselves, and I don't want to say it's not just younger kids. my daughter's doing really well in public accounting at EY, but they're so excited to go get that next job. It's really important to figure out how to sweep the floors and haul the trash well before you start working in the service department and before you start working in parts, and do a really good job being a parts guy before you become the parts manager or a salesman before you become the sales manager. And I've seen people derail themselves because they get ahead of themselves. They don't do their current job well, so much so that they may have a lot of upside, but they end up losing their job because they're so focused on that next job and not doing the current one. And then if you build the right team underneath you, if you're a leader in a business and you were doing a great job, CJ, how do I get comfortable giving you a promotion if you haven't built the right team underneath you and have the right succession planning? Because if I move you out, your area is going to crumble, and now what am I going to do? But if you haven't built the right team underneath you, it can make promotions hard to get as well. So one, not doing the job well, and second, not being prepared with your team for that promotion, you kind of can get, hamstring from either side, is what I've found over the years.
There's something to be said about the ability to make a seamless transition when somebody leaves. Like, it speaks volumes about like kind of the farm that they grew or the garden they grew underneath them, during the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very proud. I've got, I don't know how many now, 6 or 7 just, I think, from Blackbaud that are sitting CFOs today.
Wow.
So we're a great training ground. It's awesome.
You're like the Belichick coaching tree.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's a great business for people to learn, right? Because you've seen, we've got a big portfolio. We got a lot of different solutions. We sell in a lot of different markets all over the world. We got payments, transactions. There's versus most software companies are doing 1 or 2 things, not, we got 18 separate products and then a bunch of services. And that's down from 70 something products. So a lot for folks to learn. And, there's only one CFO. And so people hit those glass ceilings. We've hired really good people. Speaking of like the NFL, I use that acronym a lot for my managers. We're not beholden by the rules the NFL teams are, right? You don't get just one first round pick. They can all be first round picks. And so I really push my people to hire really high caliber folks and with better experience, maybe from bigger jobs. And then that just makes their transition to ours easier. And they bring skills and experiences that helps make us a better company. And it just raises the level for everybody. And it's been phenomenal to see that success. And many folks have hit their glass ceiling and they've left to go get these CFO gigs elsewhere, and they're very happy where they are.
Yeah, you got a image of a tree behind you. You can kind of think about that as like the branches, off of the original tree. That's a cool one.
Yeah. That's one of the things I'm most proud of, to see people go out and be successful like that.
Yeah.
You've done your job when that happens.
I think that's the mark of like a true legacy. It's not just like what you did in the moment to improve a company's stock price. It's the people that came after and went on to do cool things.
Absolutely.
Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
Oh, shit. Too many to even think about it. I would say not expense so much. We actually had a person that ran and this was at another job years ago, had a person that was our travel coordinator for the company, had entered into a deal with all our vendors. So set up their own separate company, own separate bank account.
No.
And we're getting kickbacks on all our travel expenditures.
No way.
Yes. And it was one of my accounts payable person that was just, something didn't make sense, like lived in the same street as this person, knew enough, because in accounting, what everybody makes in accounting, even though you're not supposed to, right? But they knew what this person made and said, how can this person afford the house they're in, the car they're driving, all the stuff they're doing? And one thing led to another, dug into it. And they had been embezzling money from the company for years.
That doesn't end well.
No.
Wow.
But it tells you got to watch everything, right? I mean, because you wouldn't normally think about it because they're just taking a slice off the side. We're still booking our travel, Lord. And, you see that a lot of times with buyers, right? Purchasing people. I don't want to throw everybody in the bucket that they're bad because they're in purchasing, but I've seen that as well, where, purchasing folks negotiate their own side deals and get kickbacks for giving business to, a specific manufacturer versus another one, right? I'm going to buy these MacBooks, not these, Microsoft iPads, and, but I get a kickback through the, side channel for that.
I mean, it's great advice though for younger CFOs out there, because incentives drive outcomes, and you have to be aware of like what the different levers are out there, and just you being honest about it and telling people like it's actually very helpful tactical advice for people.
People get in trouble, right? And especially younger folks, they don't have as much to make ends meet. Maybe, got a lot of debt. It just, things put pressure on you. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. And I've seen it a lot in my career. I've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
So you do have to watch out for those kind of things.
Tony, this has been an all-timer. Thanks for doing the pod, and thanks for being generous with your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.